This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Beginning today's show is K-State's Drew Ricketts and Joe Gerken with another episode of Fins, Fur, and Feathers. This time they talk about eagles and why people might be seeing more of them. K-State agriculture economist Robin Reid continues the show by discussing the upcoming Farm and Ranch Transition conferences. She shares how attendees can get the most from the conference. Mike Brouk, K-State dairy specialist, finishes today's show by saying one way to increase margins in 2024 is to utilize technology to locate cows in the pen. He says using transponders can save time, reduce herd disruption, and provide health information. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Tuesday show with another episode of Fins, Fur, and Feathers with K-State's Drew Ricketts and Joe Gerken.
Welcome back to another episode of Fins, Fur, and Feathers. This time, Joe, I think you're going to lead the discussion, and maybe we're going to talk about eagles.
Yeah, I figured we'd get some feathers into our Fins, Fur, and Feathers podcast here. So, obviously, they're the symbol of the United States. They're the national bird of the United States, and so that's been ever since 1782. Congress passed that act to recognize them as the national bird. They're currently found throughout the contiguous United States and Alaska, so Hawaii is the only area that they're not commonly documented throughout the states, but that wasn't always the case. And, their populations have really rebounded. It's kind of a fun story to see where they got to.
So do we know why they declined?
So their populations in the 1800s, early 1900s really declined. There's a lot of theories out there. Don't want to say for sure. We don't know for sure, but some of the ideas are there was some poisoning going on at that time, trying to control some critters. A lot of livestock owners would see them preying on some of their animals, and so they might have gone out and killed the bald eagles, shot the bald eagles to kind of control them. But a lot of different factors probably in the 1800s and early 1900s that really led to their declines.
What about more recent declines?
So, there's a couple protections that we put in place, and so the Migratory Bird Act was passed in 1918, and that really put some original protections in place, started to see some rebounding. The Congress then passed in 1940 the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act. That added some additional protections, but a lot of the more recent declines that we saw were in the 50s and 60s when the populations really clashed. And a lot of that was related to DDT. So forgive me for my pronunciation here. I'm not a chemistry professor, but dichloro-diphenyl trichloroethane, most of us know that as DDT, was a common pesticide applied to reduce mosquitoes and other pests. And so that had a lot of impacts on bald eagles, but really, ecology and different critters across the board.
Why was it bad?
Yeah, so it did a great job at killing the mosquitoes, but DDT had a few unexpected consequences. And so, one of the big things is that the residuals wash into waterways, and these DDT residuals can accumulate mainly in fat tissue. So we see a lot of that in fish, but also small mammals, we'd see it as well. And so the bald eagles or other critters that are consuming this fatty tissue and consuming that DDT, we'd see it bioaccumulate. And what that means is that as it moves up the food chain, the concentrations tend to get stronger and stronger. And so the bald eagle populations were starting to see some high levels of DDT in their bodies. And that led to problems like weak eggs. And so think about an eggshell. That bird is sitting on that eggshell, and a bald eagle's pretty big. And so if the eggshell starts to weaken, gets too weak, and a bald eagle sits on it, they squish it. So you didn't have the young entering into the population. So we really started to see populations decline. That led to a population crash in Kansas really in 1950s, 1960s. They were almost extirpated, which means completely removed. There weren't any bald eagles in Kansas documented from 1960 to 1989, at least breeding pairs. There may have been one flying through, but there weren't any breeding pairs here for about 30 years. So, their numbers have rebounded pretty well. And a lot of that rebound can really be attributed to a book called Silent Spring, and that was written by a conservationist named Rachel Carson in 1962. Rachel Carson was, especially for her time, a budding female conservationist that really brought to light a lot of the effects of this pesticide use and the effects of DDT on the birds. And Silent Spring basically pointed out, hey, there are some negative effects to controlling the mosquitoes with this pesticide. And it was immediately fought back. A lot of the chemical companies weren't really happy with it. A lot of backlash from the people that were producing DDT. And really that helped to spurn kind of a grassroots effort of environmental movement. And so people started coming out and saying, hey, we care about the environment. We care about some of these critters. That led to the creation of the EPA. And ultimately it led to banning DDT. DDT is still used occasionally. There are selective uses for it. But, the broad spectrum applications that we were doing, we don't see those anymore today. And because of that, we started to see some rebounds of birds across the board, but specifically today talking about the bald eagles.
So where are we at now?
Yeah, so our low point was right after Silent Spring was written in 1963. That grassroots movement was kind of starting up. Populations of bald eagle breeding pairs were down to about 400 in the United States. So we got pretty critically low there for a little while. We've rebounded now. There's somewhere around 75,000 breeding pairs of bald eagles, probably about 300,000 total bald eagles in the United States. And so the numbers are back up to a stable level. And we're seeing them now where they were even taken off the federal Threatened and Endangered Species Act because their populations have rebounded. And specifically here in Kansas, we have about 3,000 breeding pairs. And a lot of that is because of these changes that we saw. And we have a lot of these eagles out there. One of the things I want to kind of re-mention is that Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act, right? And so that was put in place by Congress to protect these bald eagles as part of this movement and the creation of the EPA. And so that's why, the bald eagles are very protected. You can't go out and do anything with them. You can't pick up a stick from their nest. You can't pick up a feather you see. You can't, go out and shoot them or harass them or do anything to them. So they're really well protected, and those are some of the reasons we're seeing this rebound.
So why do we mainly see them during the wintertime?
Well, there's a few different reasons. Part of that is that there are more bald eagles around. So they're moving from up north where it gets really cold, and they're coming down to visit us in Kansas. So we're going to see higher numbers of them in the colder months. A little bit of it is just, the trees have lost some of their leaves, and so, we can just see them a little bit easier when they're in the trees. They also tend to, as things get colder, water starts to ice over, they're going to hunt smaller and smaller areas trying to find that open water. They eat a lot of fish, and so they're trying to get together and kind of scavenge together on those open areas. So a lot of it's just opportunity, and a lot of it's we have higher numbers here in those months.
So what type of mating system do these birds have? Are they going to be promiscuous where they mate with a lot of different individuals over their lifetime, or do they mate for life, or what do we see with eagles?
Most eagles actually are breeding pairs, so they join together and they stay together monogamous for their entire lifetime. So they're going to tend to be together, mate together for life, and return to the same nest even for life. And that's a pretty cool deal. Every year when they return to their nest to lay their eggs, they're going to add to that a little bit. So they'll take some sticks and they'll add to their nest every year, and it can get bigger. I remember growing up in Ohio, there was a nest up near Cleveland in Vermilion, Ohio. These bald eagles had just kept adding to it. It was estimated to weigh over 2 tons. So, quite a big nest, and these big birds are adding to it every year. They can get to be really, really cool and big.
So how many eggs do they have?
Generally, they're going to lay 1 to 3. On average, they're lucky if they get 1 offspring. They might have 2 that survive, but they're really trying to get 1 every year. And so that's kind of the, if they can do that, their population's going to be able to sustain itself.
When we're thinking about, laying eggs and young and all that kind of stuff, are the young eagles going to look the same as the adults, or are they going to be different, or?
Most bald eagles, we think of that majestic white head, right? And so when they're born, they're kind of just a brown color. They're a mottled brown, and they're going to stay that way for 4 or 5 years. And then when they get older, they're going to develop that majestic white head that we think about around year 5. And so these bald eagles, these young bald eagles, if you went out and saw them and didn't know what you were looking for, it wouldn't look like a bald eagle. It wouldn't have that photographic white head that we think about. It's just kind of a big brown bird when they're little. Another cool fact as they get older, though, they have something called reversed sexual dimorphism. And so sexual dimorphism is scientific jargon that means that males and females are a little bit different. And reverse sexual dimorphism just means that the females have a trait that the males don't have. And so in the case of bald eagles, females tend to get about 25% larger than males. So,
they just kind of look like a big brown bird. One of the things that really stands out to me when I'm out looking at things and I see something I think is an eagle is that beak shape.
Yeah, that big beak is just made to tear into flesh and tear apart that prey that they're going to get. When they're out hunting, they have really good eyesight, and so they can see about 8 times better than we can. They can see from a really long distance. The other thing that they can do really well is turn their head. We tend to think in science that owls can turn their heads really well. Bald eagles can generally turn their heads better than even owls, and they almost have a 360-degree view. So really good vision for them to go out and hunt with.
I mean, one of the things that I see on nature shows and stuff are like eagles going down and grabbing a hold of a big salmon out of the river and flying off with it. So how strong are they?
The talons are there really to go catch prey, and they're very sharp and very strong. The grip on their talons can reach 350 psi, which is just ridiculous to think about. There's no way that salmon or prey, whatever it is getting away once they grab onto it. So we've talked a bit about the protections against them and maybe what we can't do, but I think it's also important to spend some time talking about what you can do with them, right? And so it's always fun to see them. I know that I like to see them. I'd love to photograph them. I'm not good enough with a camera to be able to do that really well, but just enjoy if you like taking the pictures. If you don't enjoy taking pictures, just get out there and watch them. They're just such a cool thing to be able to see.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Joe. Good information, and we look forward to next time.
That was K-State's Drew Ricketts and Joe Gerken. You can listen to the full episode on the podcast streaming platform of your choice. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be back with more ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show discussing the Farm and Ranch Transition Conferences. And to talk about these conferences, we're joined by K-State agricultural economist Robin Reid. Robin, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Shelby.
Robin, this is the second year for these conferences. What is the goal of them?
Well, these conferences are really to help farm and ranches think about how they plan to transition. And I know a lot of people out there maybe aren't at the point that they're thinking about this, but I would argue at any point a farm needs to be planning for a transition, whether they have a next generation that is going to be coming back to the farm or maybe those that are not but still want to maintain ownership of that farm. Really planning for this ahead of time instead of when you have to in an unfortunate event that makes that farm into a transition situation. Really being proactive, learning about the different ways a farm can transition, how to plan, the legalities of it. Those are really the goals of this conference.
A lot of things in education probably taking place then. So who do you recommend attend this event?
This event is really for all ages. So when we've done these conferences in the past, we have a lot of multi-generations that do attend, the ones that are currently farming, the next generation that is involved and stepping in to be a part of it. Or, a lot of them are the retiring generation that even if they don't have someone stepping in, just learning about the different programs that are available, they don't have to necessarily sell their farm. There is ways to lease that out or transition it to an unrelated beginning farmer. And all of those will be talked about at this conference. So I would say anyone involved in a farm or ranch operation should take advantage of these opportunities.
You really have some important keynote speakers coming to share some of their knowledge as well.
Yes, so we had these conferences back in December of 2022, and Shannon Farrell was our keynote speaker back then. If anybody attended back then, they may want to come back and attend. He is a very dynamic speaker, and Shannon Farrell, professionally, he is a professor at Oklahoma State University Department of Agricultural Economics, and he really specializes in agricultural law and specifically farm transition. He has a family operation himself that has quite the transition story. I won't describe that here, but he has professionally worked in the area of transition and lived through it himself. He's a very dynamic presenter and really brings a lot of humor to the topic, at the same time conveying some extremely important information to attendees. So you won't want to miss Shannon Farrell as our keynote speaker. Throughout the day, then, we have other topics that we're going to touch on. One of them being a lawyer and an accountant at each location. And that lawyer is going to describe kind of the legal terms of estate planning, the entity structures. A lot of times an entity structure is a tool for farm transition, the probate process, buy-sell agreements, and lease agreements. And then the accountant is going to dive into current tax laws, as tax planning issues do have a huge effect on farm transition. So estate tax, gift tax, inheritance tax, capital gains and stepped up bases, and then just the tax structure of different business entities. So these are going to be the big topics that we're going to hit on these 3 conferences.
And you mentioned 3 conferences, so could you give us those dates and locations?
Yeah, so we're going to be starting at the western side of Kansas, March 6th in Garden City. We're going to be March 7th in Great Bend, and then March 8th here in Manhattan. And just so we're clear, each day is the exact same conference, but we want to make sure we get it to a hopefully convenient location for anyone that's here in Kansas.
And at those different conferences, what can attendees expect to learn?
Well, there's a lot of the topics that I covered here, but also just what services are available out there. I'll talk towards the end of the show about our Office of Farm and Ranch Transition, but there's a lot of assistance that one-on-one can be obtained to help the farm transition, and really just tools that families can use on having those initial conversations about what the goals of the farming operation are, and then moving into taking those goals and actually putting them into writing with a legal document. So really, we're going to start from talking about the beginning of the process to the end and the different steps that each family or farm needs to talk about along the way.
And this conference is supported by a cooperative agreement with the Farm Service Agency. And so can you describe that program?
Yeah, so I was really excited to get this cooperative agreement with Farm Service Agency. They've had this program in place for a number of years, and here in Kansas, this is the only program that offers some incentive for beginning farmers to have land access, and transitioning farmers or retiring farmers to have an incentive to get that beginning farmer on the farm. So what it is called the CRP Transition Incentives Program. And again, this is through Farm Service Agency. The land needs to be enrolled in the Conservation Reserve Program, or CRP. Those are typically 10 or 15-year contracts. So as that CRP is coming out of contract, and really specifically the last 2 years of the contract, the landowner can sign up for this program. What it does for the landowner is that it gives them 2 extra years of CRP payments. So that's huge. But what the landowner needs to do is find a qualified beginning farmer that would like to take that land over and put it back into sustainable grazing or crop production. So to qualify to actually use the program, that beginning farmer also could be a veteran, but they would need to either enter into a purchase agreement with that landowner or a long-term lease, and that's at least 5 years. So again, this program really helps connect landowners with beginning farmers, take that land that's now in CRP contract, transition it back into production, whether that's grazing or crop production, and help that beginning farmer get access to that land by that landowner having additional financial income other than what the beginning farmer can offer them.
And so for beginning farmers, something that the AgKansitions office can also help support with, and what other things can people find in the Office of Farm and Ranch Transition?
So the Office of Farm and Ranch Transition, one thing that they really can offer along to complement that CRP Transition Incentive Program is our Land Link. And if you're not familiar with that, we started that almost 2 years ago now. And what that is landowners or retiring farmers that don't have someone that wants to step in and take over their farm, but they don't want to just sell it. They want an opportunity for someone else to come in and take over their operation. We can help connect them with young beginning farmers that don't have an opportunity to farm. So how that works is the landowners fill out an application, are in our system. The land seekers, as we call them, also fill out an application. And it is all confidential. So the landowners and the land seekers actually don't see each other's names until we see if there are potential matches. And then we'll provide that landowner with the land seeker's application, and they are welcome to contact them, or we'll facilitate them being contacted and see if it's maybe a match to help transition that operation too. To further that, we really want to support those transitions and family-to-family transitions with one-on-one consultation services. So what that involves is either our director, Ashley Westerhold, or one of our K-State farm analysts coming out to the farm, sitting down with the family, and talking through what are the goals, what does a farm transition look like, is it going to be financially feasible, what needs to be put in place to make it successful, and really help with those one-on-one services to help in farm and ranch transition.
So for people who would like to learn more about farm and ranch transition at these conferences, how can they go about getting registered, and what is the cost of registration?
So to get registered, you can either go to our agmanager.info website under our events page, or you can go straight to the AgKansitions.org site. So that's AgKansitions instead of transitions. So K for Kansas. Either one will get you to these conferences. You can also give us a call in the Agricultural Economics Department or Office of Farm and Ranch Transition. The online registration is $60, and we would like everybody to be registered a week before the conference. And we, again, really encourage families to attend together and take in this conference.
So as you mentioned families there, Robin, really something then for maybe the older and younger generation to get something from this conference?
Yeah, I think the best thing, in family communication even is to firsthand get this information together. I think a lot of times if only one or two people attend the conference and they bring it back and then try to talk to their family about it, they don't have the same experience. It really is beneficial for all the family members involved, and even some of those that may be not ever coming back to the farm, but going to be a part of the ownership of that farm in the future. So, siblings that moved away from the farm, having them come as well and just really take in the information and understand how important this is for the future of the farm to talk about, have these conversations, and put plans in place.
Robin, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today and share with us information about the Farm and Ranch Transition Conferences.
Yeah, just to remind you again, March 6th in Garden City, March 7th in Great Bend, and March 8th in Manhattan.
That was K-State agriculture economist Robin Reid. You can find more information about the Farm and Ranch Transition Conferences and get registered for them by going to www.agkansitions.org. They do ask that you get registered 1 week before the event, and registration does cost $60. I will link all this information in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but stick around because we have more for you ahead.
This is Agriculture Today. Along with Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. We end today's program with this week's milk lines. Increasing margins on the dairy farm in 2024 will be as challenging as it was in 2023. K-State dairy specialist Mike Brouk suggests utilizing technology to find cows in the pen as one way to increase margins. He says using transponders can save time, reduce disruption of the herd, and provide health information.
Today I'd like to visit with our Kansas dairy farmers concerning some things you might want to do to try to increase your margin as we go into 2024. As we come out of 2023, we had a lot of challenges when it came to margins on our dairy farms. And in 2024, some of those same issues are going to continue. So what are some things we might want to think about in trying to increase margins in 2024? There's an interesting thing that we might think about, and that's how we use technology on our dairies. You see, there's some technology that is actually available that would actually save us time on certain jobs and may ensure that certain jobs actually get done. These jobs are very critical to the bottom line of our dairy. So one of the things that you might want to consider is how you use technology to find cows. Let's say you're a dairy and you've got 200 cows in a pen, or maybe you're a larger dairy and you've got 400 to maybe 600 cows in a pen. And you know you've got one cow in the pen that you need to find. She needs to be checked on. Maybe she's a lame cow. Maybe she's a cow that was down in milk production today. But you got 200 to 600 cows in the pen. So how are you going to find that one cow? Well, most of the time we send an employee out, and the employee hunts for that one cow. It may take them quite a while to find it, and keep in mind that as they move through the pen, they're disrupting the activities of other animals. You see, our interactions with cows in the pen, particularly on farms that are milked conventionally, stirs cows up. Cows get up, they move around, they stop what they were doing, and they start paying attention to the person that's moving through the pen, looking for that one individual animal. So, what is the solution? Well, there's some really neat technology that's available to us today that actually can tell you the location of each animal in the pen. Yes, they do have to wear a transponder, typically around the neck. Now, that transponder is going to provide you with some health information as well as information on activity that you can use to determine heat detection as well as how the animal is doing health-wise. So it's more than just a tracking device. Some of you probably have tracking devices on your phone, if you enable those. Some of you maybe even have a tracking device on your watch. Again, has to be enabled. Others can see exactly where you're at any time that the application is initiated. Same works for the cows. So you have to have some equipment installed in the barn. Works a little different than what the tracking devices do on our phones and our watches and other devices that we might have. Because of the tin roofs that we have involved with many of our dairy barns, we have to have a different piece of technology installed that will actually pick up the signals within the barn. But these are very accurate. They will reduce the amount of time that our employees are looking for specific animals, and they will reduce the disturbance that we cause when we enter the pen to find a specific animal, or maybe a small group of animals that we need to take a look at. This will ensure that certain things actually happen. Maybe there's an animal that actually needed an injection today, and that was missed as she came through the parlor. Well, now we can easily find her and give her that injection that might be required. Also, animals that we might have missed on the breeding list that need to be bred today. Since we can easily find the animal, we'll take the time maybe to do the breeding. This will free up time of your management team to do other things. Rather than just looking for cows, they can now spend time on more important activities such as how they're actually inseminating the animal, or maybe other additional management things that we need to accomplish in the day to detect more animals that might need some individual attention. This is Mike Brouk with K-State Research and Extension, encouraging our dairy farmers to consider how you might utilize technology to locate individual animals in your pens.
Thanks, Mike. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.